Welcome to English Every Day, your daily dose of English learning, fun conversations, and practical tips to take your language skills to the next level.
Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Great. Let's talk about conversation, like really good conversation.
I'm all ears.
Perfect. So we found this awesome interview from the international educator, Thai Online.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay, cool. So it's with these two students and their teacher.
Right.
They started this philosophy club at their school.
In Melbourne, Australia.
Yep. And it got really interesting really fast. They're tackling all these tough topics.
Yeah, like way beyond your typical after-school club stuff.
Exactly, like how to disagree respectfully, all that. But they also learn so much about themselves along the way.
Real personal growth.
Yeah. So that's what we want to unpack in this deep dive. What made these conversations so powerful for the students?
And what can we all take away from their experience, no matter, how old we are?
Totally.
It's kind of cool how the club wasn't like a school thing. It was all the students' idea.
I know, right? They were so inspired by their theory of knowledge class. TOK,
TOK. The framework that pushes open-mindedness and critical thinking.
Exactly. But some listeners might not know about TOK.
Right.
So it's basically this way to think about the world, encouraging you to question everything and be open to different perspectives.
Yeah, not just accepting things at face value.
Yeah. So these students, they were clearly using those TOK skills in their club.
They took that open-mindedness from class and said, hey, let's use this to talk about real stuff we care about.
So smart. But if they were already getting some of this in class, why the club? What drew them in?
Well, maybe they needed a space that was, truly theirs.
Okay, I see. They had the freedom to choose what they talked about.
Yep. No curriculum, no grades, just, pure conversation.
Yeah, and maybe there's something about, being with your peers outside of class.
Totally. You can be more vulnerable with friends,
Yeah, let your guard down a bit.
Absolutely. But even with all that freedom, that first meeting,
Yeah.
It was kind of rough. They were all hesitant to actually, talk.
Makes sense. Speaking up can be scary, especially when you don't know what to expect.
Right. Imagine trying to start a conversation about, something really personal or controversial.
Oh, yeah. It takes guts to put yourself out there like that.
It does. It's about being vulnerable, taking that first step onto the dance floor, so to speak.
Oh, I get that. The dance floor analogy. You're standing there thinking, what if I look dumb? What if no one wants to dance with me?
Exactly. And in a conversation, it's that same fear. The fear of being judged or saying the wrong thing, that can keep us all quiet.
So how did they get past that initial hesitation?
Well, Allison and Audrey, the students leading the club, they kind of had this aha moment.
Oh, interesting. What was it?
They realized they had to be the ones to, show vulnerability first.
Smart. Lead by example.
Yep. Actions speak louder than words. And being vulnerable themselves, it made everyone else feel safer to share.
It's so true. It's always harder to be the first one to open up.
It is. But think about it. Whether you're at work, at a party, wherever, if you're willing to be vulnerable, it gives others permission to do the same.
Makes sense. So what was the topic that finally got them talking?
Love.
Of course. Who hasn't struggled with love at some point, right?
It's universal. And, super personal. It forces you to look at your own values and experiences.
So by Allison and Audrey being open about their own ideas about love.
Made it okay for everyone else to chime in.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what if we all did that more? Instead of waiting for someone else to be vulnerable, what if we just took the lead?
Right. Maybe that's all it takes to spark a really good conversation.
And speaking of sparks, their next meeting was a hit too. But with a kind of unexpected topic.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
Personality types, like the whole Myers-Briggs thing.
Oh, the MBTI. I can see how that would be a good conversation starter.
Right. But, it can be controversial too.
Oh, totally. Some people think it's just a way to put people in boxes.
Yeah, and I know people who, use it to label others, which is so not the point.
Right. But the key is how you use it. And these students, they were using it as a tool for self-discovery.
Not for defining each other. I love that.
Yeah, it was all about, understanding themselves better.
I bet that got them talking. It's you hold up this mirror and suddenly you see yourself in a whole new light.
Exactly. And the interview mentioned how some students were surprised by how accurate their test results were.
They were shocked.
Yeah, wow, this really does describe me. They started to understand why they interact with the world in certain ways. It was a whole new level of self-awareness,
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about oh, this is me. It was about appreciating how everyone's different.
Right. Like those differences actually make the group stronger.
Exactly. Especially when you're tackling these like big, complex topics, different perspectives are so important.
Okay, so we've got a group of like teenagers, right? They're excited to have these deep conversations exploring all these things. But let's be real, people don't always agree.
That's true.
So how do they deal with disagreements? Like when people had totally different viewpoints.
Well, that's where their TOK background really came in handy.
Okay, interesting. How so?
They learned that like directly shooting down someone's opinion,
Yeah,
it usually just leads to a dead end.
because it feels like an attack, right?
Exactly. Instead of trying to prove each other wrong, they focused on trying to understand like why someone believed what they believed.
Subtle, but important.
Right. It changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah, it sounds like they were more interested in like getting to know each other than, winning an argument.
Totally. And the interview gives this great example. Audrey was talking to some younger students. It was about inclusion. And one of the kids said something about, like, everyone in Australia should speak English.
Oh, wow. That's a tough one.
Right. It would have been so easy for Audrey to, like, to get defensive.
Shut the whole conversation down?
Yeah. But she didn't. She chose to, like, be curious instead.
About why the kid felt that way.
Exactly.
That's amazing. So mature. I mean, it takes a lot of, like, self-awareness to not let your ego take over in those situations.
It does. And it's a good reminder for all of us, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, next time someone says something that, pushes your buttons,
Take a breath.
ask yourself, why do they believe that?
What's their story?
Because everyone has a story. And their beliefs, even the ones we don't like, usually come from somewhere.
Right. And by listening, by being open-minded, maybe we'll learn something.
Yeah.
Or at least, build a bridge instead of a wall.
Okay, so we've seen how these students, they created this space for real talk, embraced vulnerability, handled those tough disagreements. But here's the big question.
Yeah.
How did leading these discussions change them, like personally?
That's what makes this whole thing so powerful. It shows how conversation can help you grow.
Like actually change who you are?
Yep. Both Allison and Audrey talked about how the club changed them.
In what ways?
They said they became better listeners, more confident in sharing their own thoughts.
And more open-minded in general.
Totally. It's like they were working out these conversation muscles.
And those muscles got stronger over time.
Exactly.
It's funny, right? We spend so much time in school teaching, academic stuff.
Yeah.
But how often do we actually teach kids how to have a good conversation?
Not enough.
It's such an important life skill. And these students, they also realized something else.
What's that?
They realized how powerful it is to, like, model the behavior they wanted to see.
Lead by example.
Yep. Actions speak louder than words.
All the time. They knew that by being open and respectful and curious, they were setting the tone for the whole group.
And it's not just about leading a club, right? It's everything.
Everywhere. At work, with friends, even with strangers, we can all be that example.
One conversation at a time. And speaking of examples, these students, they had a message for educators.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
They actually wrote, like, a Dear Teacher letter,
Oh, that's sweet.
sharing what they'd learned.
I love that. So what did they want teachers to know?
They talked about how grateful they were for teachers who create safe spaces,
Yeah.
where students feel comfortable being themselves.
Where they can be vulnerable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because without that trust, these kinds of conversations just wouldn't happen.
Right. They need that foundation.
It shows how much those positive classroom experiences meant to them.
Absolutely. And they also said how important it is for teachers to, like, walk the walk.
Model those positive behaviors.
Yep. Show respect for students. They saw firsthand how much that mattered.
It's a good reminder for all of us, really.
Yeah.
We're not just teaching information, we're shaping lives.
Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference.
Like really listening to someone.
Or just validating their feelings.
Powerful stuff. Okay, so we've covered a lot. The club, how they tackled these big topics, the impact on the students, their message for teachers. But what was, like, the overall takeaway? What did this experience mean for them in the grand scheme of things?
It went way beyond just, philosophy. It became about something bigger.
Okay, like what?
Belonging. These kids, they found a place where they belonged.
Because in the conversations?
Yeah. Like, through talking so openly and honestly, they realized they weren't alone.
In how they felt and what they were going through.
Exactly. It's like, oh, someone else gets it. Someone else feels this way too.
You're not the only one.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about like agreeing on everything.
Right.
It was about appreciating the differences too. Like
Yeah.
learning to see those different views as, valuable.
Adds more to the conversation.
Right. Like think of a painting, all one color would be kind of boring.
Yeah.
Needs those different colors to be interesting.
I like that. So they felt like they belonged, like they were part of something bigger.
Yeah. And that, I think, it had a huge impact on them, like on their confidence, how they felt about themselves.
Okay, yeah. Makes you think about how often we keep things bottled up, right? Especially nowadays. It's so easy to just get lost in your own little world.
Yeah, you go down that rabbit hole, start overthinking everything.
It could be so lonely.
It is. But what this club shows is that, sharing those thoughts, even the tough ones, it can be really freeing.
It's like you're taking something that was heavy and you're bringing it out into the open.
Yeah, you share the load.
Wow. This is inspiring stuff. Making me want to start my own conversation club.
You know what? You don't need a club. You can have these kinds of conversations anywhere.
So what's the secret? What makes a conversation really transformative?
Well, based on what we've learned from Audrey, Allison, and Darlene, it seems like a few things are key.
Okay. I'm listening.
First, got to create that safe space.
Where people feel comfortable, right?
Exactly. Let go of the need to be right all the time. Be willing to, share your own stuff. Listen without judgment.
Kindness and curiosity.
Yeah. And speaking of curiosity, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Instead of just disagreeing.
Right. Like if someone says something you don't agree with, try to understand where they're coming from.
See their perspective.
You might learn something. And lastly, just be present.
Put the phone away. Make eye contact.
The simple things, they make a difference.
They do. Wow. Okay, this has been so eye-opening. Really makes you think about the power of conversation.
It is pretty amazing what these students did. They took the initiative, built this community, made a real impact.
And they weren't even adults yet.
Shows you that anyone can make a difference.
That's true. You know what stuck with me? Just how much a simple conversation can change things.
It's true, right? Just asking a question, really listening, sharing your own experiences. It can lead to such amazing things.
But we get so busy we forget about that.
Yeah, you're rushing around, quick hello here, distracted dinner there, scrolling on your phone instead of talking to the person next to you.
Oh, man, yeah.
And we get so used to those surface level interactions.
We forget what really matters.
And what these students found is that those deeper conversations, the ones where you're really open, really vulnerable,
Yeah.
those are the ones that stick with you. They make you feel seen.
Understood.
Yeah. And that feeling, that sense of belonging, it can change everything. Gives you the confidence to be yourself, to speak up, to make a difference.
So powerful. So as we wrap this up, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Where in your life could you have more of those meaningful conversations?
Who could you reach out to? What questions have you been holding back?
It's a challenge to all of us, to put down our phones, turn towards each other, and really talk.
Because, like we saw today, even a simple question.
Yeah.
It can spark a connection, ignite a passion, maybe even change the world.
So true. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
Keep those conversations going, everyone. Until next time.